Hello, everyone, and welcome to an expert guide to building a ransomware resilient architecture. My name is William Bell, Executive Vice President of Products with phoenixNAP, and with me today, I've got Michael Deemer, Inside Systems Engineer at Veeam. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, William. Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to jump right in here, friends. So everyone here knows the problem. Right? I feel like if you haven't heard about ransomware, then you're living under a rock, right? So it says, 300% in 2020. I saw a study yesterday from guys over at, I forgot what the company was, but I think they said 415%. But, truly at the end of the day, what we've got going on right now is a massive influx of ransomware attacks on every single industry. We're going to talk a little bit about more people that are at risk in a second, but, ultimately, the attackers are getting smarter, right? They are looking to get paid. And what we saw back in the past is, people kind of looking to do damage, trying to really disrupt operations. And now we've seen this entire focus shift to making sure that people understand exactly what it means to them if they don't pay the ransom, right? And so it's become important that, well, it's always been important, but it's become extra important that everyone really sinks their teeth into what they can do to make sure that their organization is protected from these types of attacks. And so we're going to talk a lot about that today, right? A lot of these statistics are slightly manipulated by the fact that we've had a lot of high-profile attacks, bigger ransoms getting paid, but that does not mean that you're exempt, right? Like every single industry is looking, is exposed in some capacity. But the good thing is there's some really easy ways to make sure that you can kind of keep your head above water. So we look at the top industries at risk, right? It's to some extent who you would expect, right? So local government, higher or education in general, mostly SLED, right? The non-higher education, kind of that local, state, local, lower school. These are the people we see kind of constantly getting hit by these things. A lot of time it's due to budget restrictions and not being able to invest in security the way that they want. But, retail, due to their breadth of systems and how many systems they have worldwide, law firms and dental practices and all these kind of professional services, like no one is exempt, right? But you can see that there's certainly a difference in the percentage of respondents inside that category. So in the way you read this graph, for retail in this survey, they interviewed 435 organizations that classified themselves as a retail organization, 44% of which answered to the question, in the last year, has your organization been hit by ransomware? So like, that's it. This was not a hard to answer question. In the last year, has your organization been hit by ransomware, right? And so these are really high numbers when you break it down into amount of people affected. Just in this chart, just from this survey, you've got, I don't know, roundabouts, probably 3,000 victims, 4,000 victims, doing that in math. So something to keep on top of. And what we're saying, what we're seeing here is amount of people that got their data back has actually increased. One of the things that I think this is interesting is the amount of payments pretty much makes up the delta, and then alternative solutions for getting the data back, right? Sometimes they've been lucky and been hit with old ransomware. Keys have been posted on the internet. There's a myriad of other things that kind of classify in there, but this has truly turned into a business. It's a business. It's not this thing where they're really trying to hurt your business and take you out of business. No, in fact, they probably want the opposite. They want you to pay and then get hit again later, right? And pay again. And so there's this really high rate of people that are not losing everything. But here's what I say is not being covered by assessments like this, is amount of these organizations that had their critical intellectual property stolen in the process. And that's the thing that I think is interesting that's not being covered very well, because everyone focuses on the locking and the payment, right? But the exfiltration of data has become more rampant, right? And we've actually seen some of these extortion schemes kind of, expand themselves into, not only have I locked your data, not only do I want you to pay me, but if you don't pay me, I've exfiltrated your data and I'm going to post it all on the internet, right? And I'm going to shame you, essentially. Not only the fact that you got hit by ransomware, but I'm going to put all your dirty laundry on the internet as well as possibly your intellectual property. And so it's become more and more. One of the things that's frustrating on that is the topic of this kind of webinar, data protection as a means to protect yourself against ransomware. Well, we haven't made a lot of headway. And so the reason for this is because, I feel like there's this idea that it's not going to happen to me. That's pretty pervasive. The other one is poorly implemented backup regimes that ultimately don't help you. Didn't test your backups, didn't find a place to store them that were immune from being also encrypted. And so Michael's going to talk a little bit more about that and what Veeam and phoenixNAP are doing to help in those types of situations. And so what makes this, really hard, right? And so we see, all these sophisticated technology implementations. Work from home as part of COVID has just massively distributed the attack footprint, right? And put devices that have access to critical systems, whether they should or shouldn't is not up for debate, I guess, right now. But ultimately, companies have workers that have access to critical systems via a network, sitting at home on unprotected other networks, right? Completely exposed, with very, very little or rushed implementations of external connectivity, right? And little protections against admittance and things like that. The other thing that's making this difficult is we see crazy advances in some of these ransomware capabilities, right? And so you guys can go Google some of these things, but like process of double dipping, different types of extortion, encrypting, double encrypting certain items. There's just this whole slew of things that can go on. And so the other thing I would say in this is this next statistic, that paying a ransom doesn't guarantee a successful data restoration, fully recovered lost data. I think that ultimately what is driving this number to be so low is not that they don't ultimately get access to some of their data, as you saw from the previous statistic, 94, 96% of people, but the amount of loss of data that happens during the process. And a lot of times, backups, they might not have backups of all their data. So this kind of drives some of that to be low. I think that the other thing that is important to point out here is, and that won't really be solved by the technologies we're talking about today, but ultimately, not only can attackers take control of your systems and lock them and encrypt them and ask you for ransom, they also likely have installed in the process many command and control subsets that really make it difficult for you to remove these people from your environment completely over time. And so you need a very robust, layered approach to malware protection, ransomware, and data protection, right? To ensure that you get the full effect of protecting yourself from these types of attacks. I think this is the funny one. The last data point here about getting your data back by paying the ransom is a very hot topic, right? Because obviously the United States government specifically and CISA say don't pay the ransom. Okay, well, we know that a lot of people are paying the ransom and they're scared. They don't want to be in the headlines. They want their data back, right? All those reasons, good reasons to pay the ransom. The problem with pay the ransom is it makes people want to do it more, right? And so, there are active conversations and at very high levels in government about essentially making it illegal to pay ransoms. Also severely limiting your ability to transfer money into cryptocurrency so that you can pay the ransom anonymously. And in fact, I was listening to I had actually never heard of this, but I was listening to CNBC. They had a company on there that has risen quite dramatically in this, and their whole company, well, they claim to do more than this in terms of helping organizations diversify their portfolios with cryptocurrency, but they're essentially a market maker for cryptocurrency conversion, and firms actually reach out to them because they have the ability and the networks to take transfers of cash from banking institutions and quickly convert that into the cryptocurrency of choice of the attacker, which is not typically Ethereum or Bitcoin, it's other altcoins, and make those payments, facilitate those payments. And I would imagine that likely companies like that come under heavy regulatory scrutiny and/or are prohibited from those types of actions in the future. So not only is it important that you take these steps and protections that we're going to talk about today, but also you may not have the choices you have in a year or 2 years to even make that business decision to pay the ransom. And so that's going to put you under a greater challenge to ensure that you have viable copies of your data, even if that means a data loss of some type. And so we know that there's more people out there remote working from random places, new devices, all kinds of different things causing more vulnerabilities, bigger attack footprint. Spending in cybersecurity is starting to increase again, but it has been very flat to negative, or in terms of not negative, but decreasing over the last 10 years prior to COVID. And ultimately, these data backup procedures, people still think that if I have a SAN for my backups and I've got a technology like Veeam, that's enough. I just make a copy and we're good, right? And unfortunately, the answer is no. And so we're all working very quickly to make this a better experience. There's lots of things that you can do. And this is what, from a PNAP Veeam perspective, we think your best opportunity looks like, right? So breaking it down for you, you follow the 3-2-1 backup rule that Michael's going to talk about, making sure you got many copies of your data, right? You make sure at least one of those is offsite and or in concert stored on a medium that is immutable, i.e. completely offline, which I'm not super advocate of, but at minimum completely offline, or an online copy that has a specific capability to ensure that that data cannot be changed. It is stored on a storage device in such a manner that the data cannot be changed. You got to make sure you continuously take those backups. You hit your recovery point objectives and your backup targets internally, and test, right? Because ultimately, all of these plans are great until you need your backup and you didn't actually ever test it. And you don't know if it's good. You don't know if your applications are consistent. You don't know if anything's actually going to work when you bring it back up until you try it. So test. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike, and he's going to walk us through Veeam and what they're doing to make sure that we all stay protected, and what they're doing to empower service providers like phoenixNAP so that we can help organizations together stay protected from these types of attacks. Take it away, Mike.
Sweet. Thank you very much, William. So, hey, everybody. My name is Michael Deemer, engineer here for Veeam Software, and I'll be taking you through the Veeam backup and disaster recovery model. But before I do that, I do just want to kind of do a little brief overview of kind of some of the things I heard that is very key to actually building this particular backup sector, right? Which is, you know, ransomware is going away no time soon. It's only increasing, as William has, told you a little bit prior. And from being internal here from Veeam, I see it all the time. It's steadily increasing, and the more that we're working from home, and the more that we're branching out, it doesn't matter what vertical you're in or what business model you're in, everybody's vulnerable. And that kind of really leads me to some of the things that he was already talking about, kind of like the 3-2-1 rule, the immutable RPOs, RTOs, and then the DR plan. So this really kind of dictates kind of where we need to go, right? There's a lot of different things kind of in queue that we need to do. And one of those very first things that we really need to do is master the 3-2-1 rule. Now, some of you guys may know or may have heard of the 3-2-1 rule, but I'm going to break it down. And then Veeam actually has what's called a 3-2-1-0 rule. Now, with the 3-2-1 rule in general, this is kind of how it breaks down. So you have 3 different copies of your data. Now, you have active fulls of these data. Those .vbks are actually active fulls. And then on number 2, it's actually 2 different types of media, whether that be spinning disk and tape, and then actually having one off-site. So having one at phoenixNAP or a data center, or maybe like another object storage vendor. Now, with that being said, once we can pair all 3 of those together, there's one last thing that we really need to do, so that way we know with 100% certainty that we are good and golden, and that is a 0 rule. So the 0 rule is backup and recovery, and William was actually just talking about this, which is testing. It is honestly one of the most critical pieces other than the backup, making sure that we test the backup to make sure there's no corruption, there's nothing going on with ransomware, there's nothing going on with anything, so that when we go back to restore it, we're actually good to go. Now, that's huge. Now, kind of moving on to our next slide here, I'm going to be kind of talking about what it looks like when ransomware hits. Now, what is that going to really look like? And I'll kind of show you that here on the next slide. And that's what we're going to do, a very kind of high level of what it looks like when ransomware hits. So if you could, for me, William, just one more slide up, please. And then we'll kind of look over this. So what I want to talk about is what it looks like to know if you have a good copy, what it looks like when, VMs are actually getting encrypted. So I'm going to kind of break this down from the left to the right-hand side. We're actually going to be building off of this slide, so I'm not saying you got to get used to it by any stretch of the form of the imagination, but there is going to be a couple slides that kind of vary from this one, and they're going to look very similar. So on the left-hand side, we have our hypervisor, whether that's Hyper-V, VMware, or Nutanix AHV, right? And then we have the VMs that are above it, whether those are data stores, applications, files, unique data. And then off to the left, you see that little green icon. That little green icon is actually the ransomware asking for money, so some type of cryptocurrency. Again, usually not one of the big guys because they're a little more trackable now. Back in the day, that might have been a thing, but now they're going for those offset cryptocurrencies. Now, below that is actually going to be your actual servers. So you have your HP, Nimble, NetApp, Dell EMC. And then, so what does it look like when you actually get hit with ransomware? So as you see above your hypervisor, you see those VMs are locked now. Now, if you follow that path right, now your backup target, which was that HPE store once, or Catalyst, or maybe even a Dell data domain, now it's like locked, right? We can't actually get to it because it has ransomware on it. So what do we need to do? The very first thing we need to do is start to test. Again, making sure that we're valuable with that 3-2-1 rule. And this is where we introduce on-demand sandbox. or sometimes it's also referenced as data labs. So this on-demand sandbox, what is it really going to do? It's really going to spin up a virtual machine with that backup in it, making sure that we're scanning for heartbeat tests, ping tests, application tests, but more importantly, we're also going to scan it with AV to make sure that we can actually verify these backups. So when we go back to restore to production, we know we're good to go. Again, very, very mission critical. And this is how we know we have a good copy, is with that on-demand sandbox. Now here on our next slide, it's going to look like what we would do if we were recovering from storage snapshots. Now, recovering from storage snapshots look a little differently than recovering from like an average backup. Now, as you can see here, let's just pretend you're doing a nightly backup every night at 8 p.m., right? And let's just say something goes down maybe at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning, or in the afternoon here. What happens? Well, you know that you're going to be missing data because you're not taking frequent backups. Now, how do we overcome that? We overcome that with really leveraging modern snapshots. And how do we do that is we're going to take more frequent snapshots. In this particular case, we're going to take them hourly. So realistically, we're really lowering our RPO, our restore point objective, down to only 1 hour. So every hour from 8 to 5 p.m. and probably continuously after that, we're going to be taking snapshots. And how do we restore from those snapshots? That's actually going to be the next question, is our explorers. So our explorers actually give our full-blown recovery from Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, SQL, and SharePoint. Oh, I already said SharePoint twice, and then Oracle as well. Now, once we have that, we're going to actually do a restore process, right? So we still have that same type of diagram, but we still see those VMs are locked over the hypervisor. So again, that unique data, so that data, those applications, files, and all your unique working data is still locked. Now, what we're going to do is, since we've already tested that data, we know we have a good point to go back to. We're actually going to run from storage snapshot. So we tested it, we're good, and now we're going to take that granular recovery and push it back to either Cloud Connect. So maybe even phoenixNAP is going to be able to push a piece of that data right back to you guys on-prem, so that way you can restore it. We can also go to that offline tape repository that wasn't able to be attacked from that particular vector as well. And then ultimately, if we tested from that catalyst and we were able to run it through Sure Backup, that would be another way as well. So again, a couple different ways that we can do it. The biggest ones are, from phoenixNAP, some offsite location, offline tape repository, and make sure that we test it, or even having a storage snapshot. Those are really going to be the best ways to know that we can actually restore. Now, moving on here, how do we know that we're protected, right? So how do we know that we have a good, valuable copy? Now, we talked about Sure Backup and all that good stuff, but this kind of leads me into the monitoring and analytics side, right? So we need to know at a very high level. This is what's called Veeam 1. Veeam 1 is going to be able to find out all this kind of information. It's going to find out what VMs are protected and actually generate a report. It's actually going to do a lot more than that. It can also find what, VMs that are being overused. Maybe they have a lot of cores and they're always being taxed. And maybe you have another VM that has no resources or not a lot of resources being pulled from it. So it's going to use over and underused VMs. A lot of cool stuff here. Now, Veeam 1 and a lot of Veeam 1 information, it also can be provided from the service provider, right? So they can actually give you this kind of information, send it to you via SMTP, so that way you can kind of get that information back and kind of in your hand, so that you know exactly what you want to talk about and how you want to make those moves, and maybe move things strategically inside of your environment. Now, after we know that we're protected, right, the next thing I really want to talk about is actually going to be continuous data protection. Continuous data protection to Veeam is actually one of our awesome new products. And this is enabling us to do near zero RPO, so recovery point objectives. And what does this really do is this is really meant for resiliency, but really meant for those mission critical workloads that, maybe they're a SQL server, Oracle server, anything that, has a very high transactional database. This is great for that because we're really minimizing the data loss, right? Because we're going down to near zero, right? So every second it could be kicking off. It just kind of depends. And then what happens on the other side is recovery to that last point in time is also just as fast because we have that particular backup there. So this is where that continuous data protection really starts to shine. Now, I'm on the next overview here. I'm going to kind of show you what the actually CDP looks like on a very high overview. So at the very top here, you see those CDP coordinators. So think of this as like the top level manager. He rules literally everything, communicates with vCenter, assigns replica tasks, and so on. So he's really the boss of everything. And then you have your source filters. These run in ESXi, and these intercept IO requests, and they're really filters for instances used per vdisk in a way. Now, this is really crazy because what we do on the source here is on one per ESXi, acts as the admin and basically hosts and communicates with the CDP coordinator, the guy that runs the whole operation, and the source proxy filter. And what does this do? This is basically, relies on proxy traffic and it talks back to the coordinator to basically be the traffic cop of everything kind of going on here. So a lot of good stuff. And then the source proxy. Let's talk about the source proxy, because the source proxy honestly is the workhorse. He's changing filters, he's running RAM, he's running disk, he's creating replica states, and this is really doing this on the compression and encryption side as well. So a lot of good stuff here, very high level, a lot of good stuff going underneath the hood. And then what I actually want to talk a little bit about next is Hardened Linux, immutable repositories. This is key. So let's just pretend you guys have some Linux immutable boxes on-prem, and you guys were like, hey, I want to reuse these, or maybe, hey, I was thinking about getting some Linux boxes. What can I do with them if I pair those with Veeam? And here's the biggest thing, is we can actually make them a native immutable backup repository on-prem. So instead of landing on like a fiber channel LUN or iSCSI, something like that, we can land on an immutable backup storage right on-prem. And what is that really the biggest thing for? The biggest reason for that is ransomware, right? We already talked about those verticals and how it's increased up to 300% since just last year, right? I mean, it's huge. And there's still an intellectual properties, and that also comes down to credibility. And how do we really protect all of that under one egg is actually having some immutable repositories to land this in. So we could even pair this with an object storage repository that has immutable as well. Now, let's actually look here on the next slide of what does the repository kind of look like, and we're going to kind of do a little more in depth. So as you see here on the right-hand side, if you look in that little box, you're going to see in this little highlighted there in green, it says that backup cannot be deleted. Why can it not be deleted? Well, because it's in that immutable protection. So think of this as like almost insider protection. We can set up insider protection along with this, but it's also kind of like an insider protection in a way already. Now, what is this going to do? It's really going to make sure that malicious insiders, actors, ransomware, Trojan horses, that kind of thing can stay at bay, because they actually cannot be deleted until after that particular time frame. As you can see here, there's an end time, and after that, it's going to tell you when it can be deleted, and that's set up in there. Now, how do we do that? We do that with immutable flags in the Linux box itself. So we're making those immutable flags so they cannot be deleted right there from them. And we also have to, basically what happens is if they request it, it gets a deny action, and there's nothing that really can be done. You can always restore from the data if you're the admin, but you can never overwrite that data. So just something so you're aware. Now, let's actually look at the Linux repository, but at a different angle. And the different angle we're going to look at it from this particular case is actually admin settings or user accounts. And with that being said, that's actually going to be here on our next slide. And we're going to actually be able to use a non-root account. So what is a non-root account? In the Linux world, that's going to be like not using a Linux private key or a Linux account. We're going to be using a single-use credentials for this hardened repository. Again, it's single use, so it's not going to be used multiple different times. It's only basically to set it up and actually be able to coordinate the data to land there. Now, also remember, we always strive to use XFS on the Linux repository, and we can leverage that with block cloning. And that's really the key here, is to if you guys are going to use a Linux immutable repository, pairing that with XFS and block cloning is really going to be your biggest advantage for keeping the data, one, smaller, and super secure. Now, at the bottom here, you're going to see where it says make recent backups immutable for 30 days. So that's what the retention policy looks like, right? So if you want to set it up for 30 days, 300 days, whatever that may be, you're just going to select that there and you're good to go. All right. So the next thing I really want to talk about is the Veeam Service Provider Console. Now, this Veeam Service Provider Console is something that a lot of the phoenixNAP team knows very, very well. I know it very well, but I want to kind of give you a little bit of an insight into what it does. Now, this Veeam Service Provider Console is going to give you an overlying single pane of glass, so that way when you connect your virtual servers, workstations, physical servers, or even NAS workloads, the service provider, aka phoenixNAP, is going to be able to manage those workloads at a very high level and make sure that you guys' data is always protected. And that's really the key here, because there's a remote managed server there. They can also control failover, disaster, off-site backups, and also replication right there from the cloud backup and replication server, or aka the Cloud Connect server itself. So really cool stuff here, a very just high overview. And really the next thing I want to talk about is the same thing, the Veeam Service Provider Console, except it's going to be in a little bit different view. And this little bit of a different view is actually just showing the Veeam Service Provider Console. So right there in the middle, it's actually supposed to say reseller. I don't know how that just disappeared on me. Whatever, no big deal. So as you can see here, we have 3 different client sites on the right-hand side. Boom, there it is. All right, so client sites, we have 3 different ones. They're all independent, have no idea each other exists. So this is kind of what the infrastructure would look like underneath the hood, particularly at like a reseller or an MSP. So that's using Cloud Connect. So you would be able to see, hey, we have independent clients, whether they're backing up VMs or backing up servers, workstations, clusters, all that kind of good stuff. And then where is it pointing? It's actually pointing back to Cloud Connect, aka phoenixNAP, and landing on those cloud repositories or those local repositories. And then those feed up to the service provider console, allowing them to have a single pane of glass. So with all that being said, I was glad that you guys hear me ramble for a little bit. I'm going to pass this back over to William, one of our Platinum BCSP partners, to kind of take it over from here. Thanks, William.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike, for everything. And so really this is a better together story, right? Ultimately, Veeam has great technology, software technology that you can integrate on-prem. You can take advantage of through as a service through providers like phoenixNAP. But really what we see is this kind of working together capability and the solutions that we've built that leverage Veeam native technologies that are not just some VMware cloud sitting out there, but actually have Veeam technology on our premise, on your premise, and taking advantage of offsite cloud copies, disaster recovery, replication, all those things that you can do, point and click your way to. Truly, you can set up failover plans, no VPNs, no nothing, just HTTPS, port, URL, username, password, go, protect, right? It's that simple. And if you haven't tried it, I highly encourage you to try the Cloud Connect capabilities or the capacity tier capabilities with our object storage platform. So the best thing is, as we talk through some of these things from a data protection perspective, from a hardened Linux repository perspective, the thing that stands out to me the most is that, you have multiple choices. If you don't have the teams out there to manage Linux repositories, right, you can always make a copy of that data, stick it in the capacity tier in object storage platform like phoenixNAP Object Storage, and Veeam will manage the immutability flags and all the different rotation periods and everything on your behalf. Or you can set up Linux repositories on-prem, you can set up Linux repositories in the cloud, and you can replicate that data and get that immutable copy. There's just so many ways to make sure that you have that hardened data protection. It is truly about hardened data protection these days. We did, we did webinars 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and some of these capabilities didn't even exist. You have so many more tools in your hands. You can consume them as you need them, fully pay as you go. You can get access to quick, easy recoveries, 24/7 support. There's just so many reasons why leveraging Veeam and phoenixNAP together make a ton of sense. And we use Veeam across a ton of our different products, right? Our premier cloud platform, data security cloud, VMware Cloud Verified platform, we protect every single machine in there with Veeam. You don't even get a choice. You pick up, you move from on-prem in your vSphere environment to data security cloud. We take care of everything for you turnkey. You just need data protection. We've got disaster recovery solutions and offsite backup solutions. And even when it comes to things like Office 365, making sure that you have a copy of your Office 365 data backed up offsite and protected from attackers is essential today. And so we're delivering these capabilities around the globe. We've got stuff everywhere. I think there's a map here on the next slide, right? So there are capabilities all over the globe for most people on this call, given the time of day, it's probably Americans, but multiple different East Coast, West Coast deployments of Veeam technologies in the United States. And everything we talked about, we can help you architect, we can help you design, we can help you build and implement and get that data protection from a single provider, leveraging the investments that you may or may not have already made in Veeam. If you don't have Veeam, we can help you with that too. So just a ton of good stuff from this partnership coming to end users out there. And so I'm going to toss up this poll question my marketing team makes me put on there. If you guys would like to talk to Veeam or pNAP, doesn't matter, we'll get you in the right hands. Go ahead, click the yes button and our teams will reach out. We can talk through data protection, we can talk through ransomware, we can talk through insider protection and immutability, what it looks like to get a fully orchestrated disaster recovery solution. There's just a ton of things that we can help you guys out with that might be pressing issues for you internally. And even if we're not the right fit for whatever reason, you're going to get exposed to great technology that you can implement yourself or take somewhere else. All right, I'm going to leave that open. Hopefully some more people will click on it. We've got about 35% voted so far, trying to get it up to 50, and let's get those buttons and then we'll move to QA. Right now, if anybody has any questions, throw them in there. I'll start picking them off and see what we can get out of this. All right. Okay, all right, I'm gonna close down the poll and we're gonna move over to Q&A here. Let's migrate over to Q&A and we're gonna close this poll up. All right, perfect. So first question we got was, do Veeam or pNAP charge extra for enabling object lock or immutability features? Mike, what about Veeam? What's it look like from taking advantage of immutability?
Yeah, very good question, William. Actually, it's going to cost you a whole whopping $0 as long as you are running a paid license key.
Yeah, no, and same with us. I mean, the only thing I'll say is you can't delete the data. So if you set it for 30 days and you're using X amount of capacity for those 30 days, you pay for it, but that's it, right? So it's not like an extra fee on top of anything for that. Same applies to our insider protection capabilities. We charge you for the extra data that's being stored on your behalf, but no no extra license fees or anything like that to take advantage of that technology. It shouldn't be hard. Let's see here. Question 2. If I set the mutability period, can it be changed or terminated before it expires? Mike, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's going to be a hard no. That's what immutable's for. It's a non-negotiable after you lock it in.
Yeah, I mean that would somewhat invalidate the reason for using it if you could just click a button somewhere and turn it off. So actually, it's been an interesting thing for us as we've gone through this with different organizations, and some people want to set it to like these huge numbers, and we're just like, yeah, that's not a good idea, right? Like, it'll be there forever, right? And so, most people don't need copies of their data that are, whatever it is, 5 years old, sitting there forever, protected from ransomware, right? And so, there's definitely some good reasons to limit that use. And someone else, how long can I enable it for? Mike, I don't know. Does Veeam have a max setting on those number of days?
I'm pretty sure it's unlimited as long as pretty sure you can set it as far as you really want.
Yeah, and on our side, we ask that people don't set it longer than 30 days. We try to convince people to set it for 7, because ultimately, as long as you've got full copies of your backups inside that period, you're always guaranteed to have a working copy, right? And so it's not something that you need to set for like infinite. Typically you can archive past that. There's all kinds, in your retention period, there's reasons to kind of take those long-term backups, but yeah, you can from a ransomware protection, data protection perspective, you can set it, 7:30, and we probably wouldn't, want anybody to set it longer than that, but you can. So, and especially if you're doing it on-prem and it's your own storage and you're paying for, you know what you're doing and you're using your own storage, and, like Mike said, use Hardened Linux repos and set it as high as you want to set it. Let's see if we got any other good ones in here. Don't want to answer anything crazy. Let's see here. Okay. It says, how do people handle those Trojan horse programs that hackers plant that just sit dormant for months? Wouldn't your backups that didn't include the malware eventually get deleted and you're stuck with 0 backups that aren't corrupted? So, yes, it's potential that you can have something that goes undetected for forever and it's still there, but likely here's what happens, right? Mike talked about testing your backups and things like data lab / on-demand sandbox, right? That is the reason for that, right? Bringing that backup up, running a virus scan against it, doing other data operations, and taking it back down, right? Like that is going to help you find those, malware programs. And what ultimately, yes, if you get hit by some 0-day program that no one's ever seen before, and then it leads to some type of attack a couple of days later, there are scenarios that could be challenging. But ultimately, here's what I would say is that you would know that this happened after the first time you tried to do a restoration. You'd still have that same valid working copy because that data is still immutable, right? You can bring it up, you can do scans, you can do other malware analysis in these data labs, try to find it before you do your final restoration. There's a lot of cool technology that's out there to help prevent from situations like this. It's not, there's still gonna be outliers out there, there's still gonna be things, but I think you have a better shot than you ever really did in the past. So that's good news. Let's see here. Okay, I think there's one more question we're gonna ask here and go, let's go with hypervisors and workloads that Veeam supports. So, Mike, I'll field this one on your behalf, right? They have support for all the major public clouds at this point in some capacity. You have Hyper-V, you have VMware, and I think AHV. Is that right, Michael? The Nutanix AHV?
That's correct. Yep.
So correct. Lots of different stuff out there for different types of data and workload protections, as well as agents that can be put on anything essentially, as long as there's a running Linux or Windows operating system. There's just a ton of different capabilities that are out there to handle that. All right, let's look and see. I think I saw one more question pop up. All right. I think that's it. I think that's all we had. I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their day. The slides and the recording will be available. The recording will come later. The slides are in the handout section here, so I'll leave this open for a few minutes so everybody can download them from the handout section. Get tons of information there about our backup capabilities, all the fun services that we have as a company. Again, thank everybody for taking time out of their day. Please don't hesitate to reach out. We can help you with something. Veeam can help you with something. There's a lot of happy customers out there. So yeah, I'll leave that with everybody. And Mike, thanks again for taking time out of your day. It was always a pleasure, my friend.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. You guys have a wonderful one. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.